Hello, so today we're taking a look at the Jabiru by Iris Simulations in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This was one of the earliest third-party aircrafts available for the simulator, and it kind of shows in places, but we're not going to be too down on it. We're just going to have a look, because I know lots of people like this kind of aircraft to do bush trips and things like that. So we're going to have a look and see how it compares to some of the others. It's kind of nice in some places to see where developers have got better at doing things. So obviously this has been updated over time, but it isn't maybe quite as polished as some of the newer aircraft that have come out. So you can see around it, if we go and move the rudder, for example, there are some animations, and they have been quite detailed, but I guess the bar has been raised by some of the newer aircraft that have come out. So let's go and jump inside and have a look around. So you'll see this version of the Jabiru has got the analog gauges. There are two versions in the package. You get a J160 and the J170. The 170 has a glass cockpit. So looking around, it looks quite alien. The levers and the yoke, for example, is very odd, but it's really nicely animated. You'll notice there's this big lever. That's not what you think it is. That's the parking brake, and it's got like a ratchet on it. The engine in the Jabiru has an altitude compensating carburettor on it, so there is no mixture control. It's done for you. Also, it's a fixed pitch propeller, so we've got no propeller control either. So it's very, very simple to fly, quite rudimentary. The rolling levers you can see at either side, I imagine that locks on the real thing, but in this one obviously we can just push the throttles in and out. In the real one you would twist it to lock it in position. If we have a look around the cockpit, once we get in the air you'll actually see this a bit better, but it's actually covered in like carpet, and it's really nicely modelled actually. It's the first time I've said that about an aeroplane, that the carpet modelling is nice. There's nice things as well, like you've got the fuel gauges on the wing roots. You've also got like a Sporty's Pilot Shop sticker there, which is quite nice to see. So if you've watched any of the YouTube channels of the big aviation YouTubers like Baron Pilot or anybody like that, you'll know all about the Sporty's Pilot Shop. Anyway, let's go and see if we can get this thing started and take it for a quick circuit and see how it goes, shall we? So if we go and turn the master switch on and turn the magnetos on and crack the throttle open, I'm just going to check the volume levels before we do much else. So I'll go and turn it up a little bit, and then we'll turn the engine on. So the black button down here is the engine start switch. So if we hold it in, the engine comes to life. And if we go and look outside, it sounds really nice. So if we'll keep it on the parking brake and we'll open the engine up. So I think the aircraft does actually use the fluid dynamics in the flight model. So it is going to move around, and because it's only a light aeroplane, if you've got any kind of turbulence or anything going on in the real world, you are going to be thrown around all over the place. But that's actually quite nice, I think, that it's reacting properly. So we're going to turn the avionics on now, and we'll go and turn on the comm radios. And there's not much else to do in this version of it. It's very basic, which I kind of like. So let's go and taxi out and take it for a flight, shall we? Before we do that, let's go and have a look at the flap movement. So if I go for flaps 1, I'm using an Airbus quadrant, so it does appear there are predetermined settings for flaps. So that would be full flaps. There's a lot of them full flaps, isn't there? So we'll go for the first stage of flaps and go and taxi out and see how we get on. So I'll come off the parking brake and gently open the throttle, and we're moving. You can see how light and bouncy this aircraft is. Pressing space, you don't really need to very much, so we're just going to open the throttle gently. So visibility is very good, or as good as it gets for a high wing plane, I should say. But it's a tiny little aeroplane. If you think about, you know, the size of the pilot compared to the plane. Okay, let's go and center our view up. There's hardly any wind. We're at Boonville, by the way, D83 in the US. So we're going to accelerate down the runway. We've got a gentle headwind. So we'll get to about 50 knots to rotate. It's wanting to come off the ground straight away, look. By gently pushing back, we're off the ground already. So let's have a look outside. And we'll raise the flaps while we're here. Looks quite nice, doesn't it? We haven't calibrated the altimeter, have we? This is typical of me, isn't it? Busy talking about things. We haven't put the lights on either. So we'll just do that. Put the strobes on. Okay. So we're on live weather, so I'm not sure what we're going to find. I did have a quick look at the windsock before I started recording, just to make sure that we were going to take off in the right direction. So we're just turning over the valley here at Boonville, and we will see the runway. The doors work, by the way. I've already tried them, so while you're on the ground, obviously, if you pull the levers. There is a bit of a bugbear at the moment. There is a tablet in the aircraft, but it appears to be broken. So if we open it, it doesn't animate, it just appears in the middle, and there's a black screen, so you can see the check boxes, but you can't actually see what they mean. So it's a bit of a shame. Okay, so we're just flying downwind. We'll continue climbing. I don't think the engine is amazingly modelled, because yeah, you can just push it to full throttle and you're not going to redline it, basically. I mean, if we dive for the floor, we'll see what happens. Okay, so you can go beyond the red line. So you could potentially damage it. Obviously, if we pull the throttle back, we can get it back in the safe area. So let's try a stall while we're doing this. Look at the speed fall off. It's not a very powerful aeroplane. So it stalls in a very straight line if you enter the stall in a straight line. What about if we do it in a turning stall under power? So nose up. Let's see what happens. More and more backstick, and it's dropping a wing in. And we had to kind of straighten up before we could control that. We were in danger. We were at 140 knots, right on the limit of the airframe there. So it did pick up speed alarmingly, and I had to let go of the yoke to let it straighten up. Okay, so let's try a quick approach here. We'll do a touch and go, and then we'll circle around properly and come in for an approach. So we're going for full flaps, just to see how it behaves. So you can see, look, with the full flaps, look at the lift that's suddenly generated. I have a funny feeling though, once you get used to this aircraft, its short field performance is pretty spectacular. I'm not sure you can get away with diving here. You can see the airspeed picking up. It's quite a slippery little aeroplane. Obviously navigation is going to be very much belts and braces, with watching the whiskey compass in the middle and doing your best. So we'll just hold it over the runway, see what happens with stalling it onto the runway. Okay, back to takeoff flaps, full throttle. We should have plenty left over, he says as we skim the trees. keep out of the way of this hill, hey? But yeah, it's a very, very nice aeroplane at the end of the day. It looks nice. I've noticed the reflections on the glass are very understated. They do happen, but they're not as pronounced as some aircraft, and it hasn't got any marks or scratches on the glass. So if that kind of thing winds you up, it won't wind you up in this aeroplane, not like some of the others. Okay, so let's come off the throttle to 50%. You can see it cruises about 100 knots, 105 knots. Okay, let's roll it in. Throw the flaps down. You can see that kick up happening from the flaps. It's very, very responsive at low speed, but it's very small. It's got massive control surfaces, so you would expect that. Yeah, this is interesting. Look, you can come in far too fast if you're not very careful, and it won't side slip very much either, and the side slip is losing a little bit of speed, but not much. So if we press space to see up over the nose as we do this, we're just going to manhandle it back onto the runway. And use the wheel brakes, and obviously it's very light, so you can stop almost on a sixpence with it. It's very, very easy to manoeuvre. So we'll go and park around the back of the hangar over here. Let's see what the ground handling is like along the way. But I'm actually, you know, I don't mind it. I think it's a nice little aeroplane. Obviously, it's not modelled maybe as well as some of the newer aeroplanes that have come out for Flight Simulator. But, you know, it's absolutely fine. And it's kind of refreshing that there's not too much to fiddle with. So if you just want to go for a fly, this is probably a pretty good candidate for doing that. It's a shame the tablet doesn't work properly, but as I said, I've emailed Iris and we'll see what they come back with. I'm not sure if it's an issue with... I've tried downloading it twice, I've restarted the simulator, and I've removed all the add-ons, so it's obviously an issue with the aeroplane itself. Maybe it has been introduced in a recent version of the sim, I'm not sure. Okay, so parking brake on. So to cut the engine, this is going to be an interesting one, because presumably if I pull the lever for the mixture, it's not going to do anything, is it? So how do we cut the engine in this thing? That's an interesting one. So presumably if we... It'd be interesting to see if all these levers work. Obviously we'd have to do a longer flight to test that out with different weather conditions. So we've got carb heat, choke, cabin heat. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So if we go and just turn off the mags, that will obviously kill the engine, yeah. So it's interesting to think in terms of it having a carburetor, isn't it, really? Or, you know, this fancy carburetor that can adjust to altitude all on its own. So it's a different way of thinking that the magnetos are really your main control of the engine. But otherwise, yeah, it's nice and simple. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in the complexity of aeroplanes. And this is kind of a refreshing change that you can just go for a fly in it. There's no autopilot. There's no mixture to worry about. There's nothing, really nothing to worry about. It's all about rudder and stick. And I think it's kind of nice because of that. Anyway, so there you go. That was the Jabiru in Microsoft Flight Simulator from Iris Simulations. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And I'll see you again soon.